Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Bronstein. I am a sales manager here for our digital services team with Insight Global. On the call today, I have quite a few of my counterparts across the entire company and across the organization. But today, we're here to talk about we're here to talk about competitive hiring strategy. Really, an open dialogue to talk about how we can help our clients creating a competitive sourcing strategy, really diving into the interview process as a whole and making sure it's going to be a favorable process for both parties, both the candidate and the client, as well as how we can limit losing top talent throughout that process as well. So today's going to be an open discussion. I'd like to kick it off with talking more about our competitive sourcing strategy and how we could be of a help to you and your company as well.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect. Well, I'll kick it off here, Brandon. Hi, everyone. I am Ella Pei. I'm one of our sales managers in our digital services team as well. And when I think of even just starting our sourcing strategy or starting the hiring process, we have to just think about how are we going to drive candidates to us? Like, are we going to utilize a partner like us here at Insight Global? Are we going to utilize our internal talent acquisition team? And I think that's so important because once you, as a hiring manager, understand the initiative, you can sort of peel back from there. Is it someone that I need yesterday? Is it someone that I can take 6 months to find the right candidate? And from there, that can really lead you in which direction you and your team can really go to bring on the talent that's needed.
Yeah, Ella, I think that's a great point. My name's Alex. I'm a director of operations out of our Grand Rapids office. And I totally agree. I think one thing that comes to mind the most with me with hiring strategy is how quickly you can get candidates through the interview process. Sometimes we'll have customers come to us and they'll want to do one interview 1 week, wait another week and do the second interview. What I think they forget about is that those candidates get called every day by multiple opportunities, multiple recruiters every day that goes by. So if you can consolidate the interview process, get as many people in the room as you can at once to try to get that interview process down to like a week, that's the most effective way to do it. So that way you just don't miss out on talent that you want to hire because of competition and speed to fill, essentially.
So true. My name is Rebecca. I'm our consultant engagement lead for the digital office. I work with consultants to keep them retained and happy. And I see that so often, building relationships with candidates, like seeing them leave an interview process or even leave a role that they've already gotten because they had a bad taste in their mouth from a 4 or 5 step interview process for a lower level, I don't know, retail role or marketing role. And then you think about people that have to go through extensive coding assessments for the technical roles and all these things that aren't always necessarily the best representation of what they can do in the market. And I always see it as like a mutual respect for time. So like respecting the candidate's time, but also respecting the employer's time and how we can balance that correctly. It's such like an interesting balance that I feel like changes from situation to situation. But yeah, to your point, I mean, just lessening the length of the interview process at the end of the day is going to be what drives the needle more than anything.
Yeah, I love that, Red. Hey guys, my name is Nick Meich. I wanted to hit back on the skills assessment. Something a lot of companies do are those skills assessment, whether they're IT or engineering or operational focused, even accounting and finance, right? And I think where we start to lose people on that is if you start with a coding assessment, you're already weeding out about 75% of the market, right? Because nobody really wants to start with an assessment without really understanding the role, the company, the culture, the values, right? And then even after that, you have to realize a lot of what you can accomplish on a coding assessment can be done in an interview, talking to the individual one-on-one, right? And that's when you build that personal experience, that personal culture that the person wants to join, rather than doing it through a document or a link. And I mean, we've just seen 90% of our candidates get lost just based on coding assessments. So, a big thing is lean into that personal relationship and that culture you want to sell, and believe in that. And that's what people want. So,
and people also want to they want companies to sell to them because it's no longer like a client, it's not the client's world anymore. Candidates have a lot of opportunities, a lot of different options, industries, all of that. And I think that's one thing that I certainly saw a huge shift in over like late last year and through the recession is that if the candidate didn't have a good like experience with a client, they were out. Doesn't matter what the pay was or if it was hybrid or whatever they were looking for. If they didn't jive with the hiring managers, they were out.
It's so true. I was looking. Another huge thing is I was looking at this position in Overland Park, Kansas, and this one city is looking for about 20 transmission engineers throughout all the energy companies in that area. And a lot of them will look internally and be like, all right, we need these folks to fit these skill sets and these must haves. And they're only looking internally and they're not looking at all the other competitors that are sitting across their street that are looking for the same person that might be a little bit more flexible, pay a little bit more, sell a little bit more on the interview process in order to scoop them up. And so, I think pride can get in the way too sometimes with companies, which can hurt them in the long run. But I understand there's standards they have to meet. However, you still have to look at all of your competitors that are sitting blocks away from you.
And I think
Yeah,
that gives way to like a bigger conversation about like what values do we have as a team, as a company? What values do we want to instill on our people? And I've seen in so many interview processes, teams not really knowing that, not really having like a North Star, if you will. And that hurts the interview process because then you're not bringing in the right culture. You're not bringing in the people you truly want. So there's so much work that I think needs to be done on the back end of understanding direction and not even just like next year's strategic planning, like what comes from the top down, but like what you want your team to be. I've seen the most interviewers be the most successful when they are hard pressed on exactly what they want to become, what they want this person to embody. And I think the culture really goes so far in addition to the technical stuff.
Yeah. Why don't we touch on the when we really talk about sourcing strategy? I know this is a lot more for talent acquisition. I feel like it's so interesting when companies, sometimes they typically only use one sourcing tool, whether that might be LinkedIn or Indeed. However, right, when we talk about IT professionals, a lot of them come from a sourcing tool like Dice. When we talk about accounting and finance, maybe it's more LinkedIn focused. If we're talking about healthcare, there's many healthcare platforms that we utilize too. And so there's so many strategies and tools to utilize when finding individuals. And a lot of times companies kind of get stuck on one path and one tool, which, weeds out a lot of the market.
Yeah, I think something too is we have to remember that as much as it is your interview for the company, it's also all about the candidate experience as well.
What would you say is a good, is an optimal interview process? How many? In person, virtual? Like what have you noticed in the market that works best?
It depends. I mean, that's not the right answer, but I think multiple on-site interviews is always tough, even if it's an on-site role. People are taking time out of their day. They're taking a day of PTO. They're taking a sick day. That's very hard to accommodate. And I think when I see like interviews go beyond the 2 and the 3 step, that's when it starts to get a little wishy-washy. Even the 3 step, right? You're thinking of, going into a marketing coordinator role and you need to meet 7 different people. Is that really necessary? So yeah, I think that's probably where it starts to get a little muddy from my perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. I also just think it's important to know it on the front end and be able to communicate it with the candidates, right? If they know what they're stepping into on the front end, then it will be okay, right? And then lastly, I think it's important to use some of the hiring models that the staffing firms that you have available to you. An example of, for some of our positions that are a little bit of a lower pay rate or a lower level position, we have what is called a 3-day working guarantee, where we'll do all of the interviews and then we can place a candidate. You can have 3 days to try them out. And if for some reason they're not a good fit, we can pull the candidate off site and backfill them with a new candidate. Or there's guarantees with even our direct placements, or we have sliding conversion scales with our contract to hire models. So sometimes I also just like to encourage our customers to use the guarantees that a lot of staffing firms and our staffing firm in particular has to offer.
Yeah, so I think like I think like the meat of our conversation really in terms of building a competitive hiring strategy is honing in on what culture you want, expediting the interview process as much as possible, and then not falling into typical interview practices that don't necessarily represent your teams, like the coding assessments or the in-depth stuff right on the front end. Really working to capture the candidate's attention in the beginning in a meaningful way, I think is really what is at the core of the strategy.
Excellent. Well, that concludes our conversation for today for creating a competitive hiring strategy. If you are interested in learning more, please navigate to insightglobal.com and have a great day. Thanks for joining us.